The Charlotte Ledger Podcast is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network.
Hey, Tony Messia with the Charlotte Ledger, and you're listening to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger by going to thecharlotteledger.com. Today's podcast is part of a special series we're doing in which we interview winners of the Charlotte Ledger's 40 Over 40 Awards. The recipients are people ages 40 and up who are making a big difference in the Charlotte area, people who saw a need and took action. You can find out more at ledger40over40.com. The host of today's podcast is Steve Dunn. In his day job, he's a mediator who offers dispute resolution services through the Charlotte office of Miles Mediation and Arbitration. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Charlotte Ledger Podcast. In our ongoing series of conversations of winners of the 40 Over 40 Award, I'm joined today by Beth Hardin. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you.
Beth, I thought that you were the Vice Chancellor for Business Affairs of UNC Charlotte, but I find I'm well behind the times. It turns out you're on a sabbatical of unknown duration.
Yes, I spent nearly 30 years of my life in mostly public higher education, doing business affairs type things, so money, people, buildings, parking, food service, safety and security, all that kind of stuff. And it's a very important part of my life. The decision, I went to grad school at Harvard Business School. It is atypical for somebody with my educational background to choose public education in general, public higher education. So that's a big part of my life. But as I reached kind of toward the 25-year mark in public higher education, I knew I wanted to have a new phase, a next phase of my life. And so I describe my life for the last year or so as a sabbatical. I have been at Harvard University as a fellow in the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative, which is designed to broaden, deepen, and accelerate social impact. And so what we've done over the last year is really explore the world's most complex problems and how one can create social movement and change to affect the world's most significant, wicked, if you will, complex problems.
Well, and that dovetails very nicely with the work that you're doing through a book club or a book group that you started. I definitely want to ask you about that, but is it okay with you if we talk about UNC Charlotte for a minute?
Sure, yeah.
Charlotte is what the Charlotte Ledger is all about.
Absolutely.
And we think about Charlotte, we talk about Charlotte, and UNC Charlotte is a huge part of that. And you were there for a long time.
Yep.
You were high up in the organization, and you shepherded it through a period of a lot of transition and growth. And from the outside looking in, it seems like UNC Charlotte is really coming into its own sort of on the national stage. And I wonder what that experience was like for you being a part of it.
So I worked for UNC Charlotte twice, first beginning in 1995 through 2003. Then I went to the University of Wyoming, where Phil Dubois, the former provost at UNC Charlotte, was president. When Phil came back to UNC Charlotte in 2005, he asked me to come back with him from the University of Wyoming, which I did, although I arrived in 2006, early in the year. So I had the opportunity to work at UNC Charlotte at a time when we were changing both in complexity and scale. The first tenure at UNC Charlotte, I worked for Jim Woodward. When Jim Woodward arrived at UNC Charlotte was the largest, Charlotte was the largest city in the U.S. with no medical school, no law school, and notably no doctorate education. And so Jim's strategic focus during the arc of his 16 years was to provide doctorate education and to expand, become a research institution. And I had the great opportunity to work on those projects. I spent 3 years. I was part of all the things that happened then. The big issue there was the University of North Carolina actually was at a time with about 150,000 people and expected to grow to about 225,000. This is the system. And so the system view was, how do you grow in a way that makes the most difference to North Carolina? The question was, what is it that Charlotte and this region of the state needed, and it needed doctoral education. And so that was not singular, but a primary focus of Jim's tenure. I spent about 3 years doing the strategy, the initial strategy and startup of what was called for years the Charlotte Research Institute. And I did that through just building out, here's how we're going to use our resources. We're going to build these buildings. We're going to hire these people. We're going to focus in these 3 areas. When I came back to UNC Charlotte with Phil Dubois, in fact, over my 2 experiences at UNC Charlotte, the university grew from about 17,000 to about 30,000. So again, complexity and scale. It's actually surprising to some people that the research base at UNC Charlotte, which is still not what it should be in the state. I'm a huge fan of growing the research base in this region of the state. And so I really think this is something the state should invest in. But it still is surprising when you look at the academic programs that UNC Charlotte offers. You know, the growth in research has been meaningful and important. And doing more is really important to the economic sustainability of this region.
Sure. I mean, it seems like the university is growing in all the ways that a university would want to. Enrollment is currently at or near its all-time high. As you mentioned, there's about 30,000 students. There's an increasing number of international students, which is, I'm sure, related to the doctoral level offerings that now exist there. In addition to the work you've done in your long career in education, you are an active member of the community of the Episcopal Church of the Holy Comforter. And within that community, you've been involved with a book group that was started after a study came out that many of us Charlotteans will recall, in which Charlotte was rated 50th out of the 50 largest cities in the United States for social mobility. And I wonder what it was like for you to learn about that study and what it was about that inspired you to start your book group.
So through engagement with my church and in the community, I've been involved in shelter work, and Loaves and Fishes was started in the kitchen of Holy Comforter. And so I've had the opportunity, if you will, to be aware of hunger in our community, because every single time I walked onto that campus, it's not that big a place, or into that building, we were receiving and distributing food to hungry people in the community. And I have been involved with Room at the End since its inception. Holy Comforter was one of the initial folks or organizations that participated in that. And
this is an organization that provides overnight shelter?
Yeah, Room at the End between December 1st and March 31st provides overnight shelter through what's now called Roof Above for people who are literally on the streets. And so those activities have always opened the door to me for the fact that there are 2 Charlottes. And so just by virtue of being hands-on in the community, emergency winter shelter, soup kitchens and things like that, being hands-on in the community, understanding that there were significant barriers to socioeconomic mobility and sustainability, that was not news to me. That was not news to me, and it wasn't news to anybody at Holy Comforter either, because it's right in front of us.
Well, you've seen this need. You're well aware of the existence of sort of an unseen and underserved population right here in this city. But something moves you at some point to get together in an organized sort of way to study. Somewhat
organized.
Well,
it's pretty organized.
You tell me whether it's more organized than something that doesn't exist, right? It was something that didn't exist before, and now it's a group of people who are on a regular basis committed to pretty rigorous examination.
Yeah, it's not a cheese and chat book group. Yeah. No,
well, there's all different kinds of book groups, but this is one that is defined by like actually reading a book, right? That's one of the things about it, right?
That's it. Yeah, pretty geeky.
Yeah. How did you get it started?
Okay. So Holy Comforter has a lot of educators. Okay, it's and it runs from preschool to university deans, associate deans, vice chancellors. It's all over the map. High school, all kinds of stuff. So there's an education bent to the group to begin with. And so the Raj Chetty's study comes out, and I was also familiar with Robert Putnam's work. So Robert Putnam is Bowling Alone. A few years ago in the Chronicle of Higher Education, a survey done of the most important books of the prior 20 years, Bowling Alone was distinctive.
And this is Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, which is about sociological dynamics that result in
lack of engagement community-wise.
The hook is that we used to have bowling leagues, right? And people would get together. And the title of the book is Bowling Alone, which explains this phenomenon of people being disconnected.
From that. Yep. So we used Our Kids, The American Dream in Crisis, which I personally consider Robert Putnam's opus. I had a real neat experience in the fall got a really sweet note from Robert Putnam. But so we used that book and we said, hey, are there other people who would be interested in talking about how Robert Putnam's framework related to, again, Our Kids, The American Dream in Crisis, a framework around socioeconomic, what I call sustainability and mobility. Plus, I was at UNC Charlotte. I have lots of wonderful friends at UNC Charlotte. And UNC Charlotte's then called the Urban Institute had lots of information about Charlotte. And so we said, hey, we should dig into this. And so we started what was initially a 5-week or 5-session series and looked at the different elements of Robert Putnam's framework. And we looked at it in terms of national data and also in terms of local data.
Now, when you say we looked at it, you've got a group of people. These are people that you knew and your friends knew. And
so we just invited people. And I thought maybe we'd have a dozen, maybe 18, maybe 24. By the end of that series, we had 50 or 60 people.
Where are you meeting at this time?
At Holy Comforter.
Right.
Yeah. It's a good parking, good location.
Sure, oh, yeah, of course.
And the price is really good.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's really good. And I will come back to that because we do it in a certain way designed to build relationships. It's about awareness. It's about relationships. It's about creating a network of people who have awareness and commitment to change the particular dynamics.
So you're there. You set up a 5. Was it 5 books or 5?
So we have a framework that we use: know, believe, and do. And it's a framework about how those 3 things intersect. And this has evolved over time and become a little bit more formalized. But we could have a longer conversation about what we know, what we believe, and what we do, and how those 3 things intersect. And again, a longer conversation about how that paradigm looks at least in my experience in Charlotte, and dealing with social movements. But we sent the invitation out to a broad group of people. We actually did another session during the course of the winter on the same book, a little bit longer session, bringing in people who are very familiar with both national and the regional data. So people have come and spoken. Many times it's the author of the book. So Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow, which is a book about desegregation and resegregation in schools. The people who spoke to us were the authors and editors of the book. So it's, we've had a range of different things, but what we want is we have meals. So many of our early participants were educators, and we wanted to honor our educators by a healthy meal. I am lucky enough to have a brother-in-law who's an organic farmer, and to be fairly connected to the Matthews Farmers Markets. We have really good food. My husband also cooks really well. And so we, 24 people, we that grew to be, 50 or 60 people pretty rapidly. But we wanted everybody to have a meal, and especially wanted to honor educators with a quality meal. So some people will talk about, in fact, you may have seen a letter to this effect from the former president of the West Charlotte High School Alumni Association, talking about our food. And we do care about that. And we want everything to be free. So we want to remove the barriers to participation. We also provided childcare. So people could come, bring their kids, have a healthy meal. We structure it so that you can sit, the little phrase is, you can sit with someone you know, but you have to sit with someone you don't know. We have a set of information that we're really digging into. And then we have a process of connecting people so that by the time you walk out, you will have met 3 or 4 people, know their names, and know something meaningful about them. So it is about creating knowledge and about awareness of what's going on in the community, trying to help people find their place in the change. I think there's much more to do in that space, actually. But trying to, is at what scale is that change? In what type of role does an individual play in that change? And then to network those people. So lightly, if you will. Again, perhaps more work to do there as well. At this point in time, we have 263 people who never show up at one time. Thank you very much.
There's 263 people who have come. Is that basically how often do you meet?
Because of my commitments, because I dig into this. While I don't necessarily become the expert, and there's a group of people who've been supported. This is not a highly structured, I would call it lightly structured group. It's been mostly in the summer. So the programs that we do mostly in the summer, I think people are honestly more open in the summer. They're not as pressured by sometimes work obligations, but certainly school-related obligations for people who have kids or who work in the school environment or whatever. So I've found the summer to be a time when people are more open to new or challenging ideas, and we have definitely had some challenging ones.
Well, so I want to dig into those a little bit, but the way that it works is that you have a time to come together. It sounds like over the summer is maybe the most active time, the time that works best for folks.
We've done things throughout the year, but
there's not a rigorous or rigid schedule to it. But when you have an event, the idea is that there's a book that you're focusing your attention on. I imagine ideally folks would have read the book.
We do encourage that.
In a perfect world, right?
So
everybody comes, they've read the book. There is a speaker who, if it may be the author of that book, or it may be somebody else who's knowledgeable about the subject. Do you have an open discussion? It seems like 50, 60, 70 people could be challenging.
Yeah. So it depends on the speaker. A lot of times the speaker is the primary conveyor of information, and we'll have conversations before and after. But a lot of times it is gaining wisdom from a speaker. Some speakers like to do turn and talk. So here, talk to your table about this. We always have some table talk, or again, it's very intentional about ensuring that there is some table talk. But and ways of getting people to meet each other. But many times, I mean, it's honestly such a great experience to have the person who wrote the research study or the person who wrote the book, that you want to absorb as much as you can from that. And in the course of 3 hours, you can absorb information, you can discuss information, you can have even, some level of heated dialogue around information. You can work through a resolution and have everybody buy in. Having short meetings to address complex problems, in my experience, is not super productive. And so one of the things that's helped us address more challenging problems is by meeting over a period of time and meeting, technically our gatherings are about 2 hours. It's very collaborative group. We all clean up together. We've gotten to the point because of the group size that we will bring in food often from outside, just because
your husband doesn't want to cook for all the people that.
No, he does not.
Well, it seems like this idea of breaking bread together and cleaning up together is all part and parcel of the project of understanding. That
it is
person to person
relationship.
Working together on something is a wonderful way to build connections. There's also something about the ritualistic aspect of going to a place at a designated time to do a certain thing. And
that's right.
I make use of that in my own work as a mediator. I'm constantly reminding people like we're here on this day to do this thing, and it helps you get it done.
It does. It absolutely does. Holy Comforter is on a bus route. We have a bus stop on the property. It's pretty accessible. It's in what used to be a fairly diverse part of Charlotte. It's gentrified. So the geography of it certainly helps. And I absolutely agree with you that coming to a place and space matters, and forming relationships in a place, those things do matter.
You've worked in Charlotte for a long time. You're now on a kind of what you describe as a sabbatical. Your options are open to you. You can choose to fill your time with whatever your priorities are. You choose to be in Charlotte now. You've looked at Charlotte with a critical eye. You've studied it. And there's a long conversation to be had about 1850 until today and the inflection point that we face collectively. But you choose to be here now. And I wonder personally what living in Charlotte means to you and what you've observed about it in the time that you've been here.
So I've lived in Charlotte 4 times. I was born in Charlotte, but I grew up in East Point, Georgia, which is on the south side of Atlanta. My parents moved back to Charlotte when I was in high school. I stayed in East Point in the area and graduated from high school, went to the University of Georgia. But my parents moved back to Charlotte for, I guess, the second time they had lived here. And when I graduated, I looked at a range of options. So I came back to Charlotte, a much simpler Charlotte, 40 years ago. I left again. Went to Boston a couple of times, Atlanta. I don't even remember all the different places, all kinds of places. I've gone for a while, came back. This is the 4th time I've lived in Charlotte. And Provost Joan Lorden talked about being at UNC Charlotte for a long time. It's because, it was a different place each time. And so Charlotte has become a different place over the course of the last 40 years in particular. And when you contrast it to being born here, it's all even more change. I grew up, again, on the south side of Atlanta, and really chose to come to Charlotte when I did after I graduated from college, because I thought that the opportunity to create a healthy ecosystem of an urban area existed in Charlotte at that point in time. There was still the opportunity to do that. And because of where the public schools were, which was, the history of public schools in Charlotte's really important and interesting and deeply embedded in Charlotte's history. And we're not there now. The difference between pre-2000 and current in terms of our understanding of the importance and the value of CMS is we need that, okay, that'd be really high on my list of needed changes. Really important. And so I have continued to come back because I thought it was possible in Charlotte to create a city that worked for everybody.
You are a recipient of the prestigious Charlotte Ledger 40 over 40 award. That's an award that recognizes the accomplishments of individuals who have some life experiences. You are in a place now where you've left a long career in education. And I wonder, what do you think about aging and the opportunity that it affords and the wisdom that comes along with it?
I love it. My husband and I both were caregivers for our mothers as they died. My mother died of COVID in 2020 in early August, although she had dementia. And I was her caregiver for the 8 years prior to her death. My husband played the same role for his mother. And those women were of a generation. Both of our mothers are college graduates. My mother was a CPA and a leader in national accounting organizations. And we see the impact that early generation of women had and the doors that were opened by that generation. And so I would call my generation a bit of an in-between generation. We're really not that leading edge of women's broader engagement. So we have the benefit of the work done before us. And then we can continue to open doors not only for women, but for, again, in my worldview, to create a sustainable life for a much broader group of people. So I very much believe that you bring everything in your life experience to where you are. And, I don't exactly know what I'm going to do. That's another question. But I'm really at a point in my life where I am listening. I spoke at Harvard Memorial Church in December, and 5 minutes on a topic that I had spent an hour and a half on in August. And it's a call, a well, and a tribe. And so my comments were oriented to what are the three things that you need when you depart from that experience. It's all about being in transition. A call, a well, and a tribe. A call is a deep and well-considered and energizing sense of purpose. The well is what is your source of sustaining strength and wisdom? Because to do the most challenging, most important things that Charlotte confronts, or North Carolina, or the U.S. or the world, you have to have a well. You have to have a well. My well is expressed through the church. That is my deepest well. Family is in that well as well. I have, etc. But, and then a tribe. So in the best sense of the 9 tribes, Native American tribes in North Carolina, in terms of the wisdom and the support and the culture and the history, you have to have a tribe to accomplish those things. Now, I would also suggest that tribe has to be intergenerational. And I am and one of the more distinctive elements of the book group actually is that it's intergenerational. So we have people who are 22 and people who are probably 75, 77.
Well, you're doing what you can to put the tribe together, and I think it's a great place to leave it. I appreciate so much you're taking the time to be with me on the Charlotte Ledger podcast. It's a pleasure meeting with you, Beth. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
That's it for today. The Charlotte Ledger podcast is produced by Lindsey Banks. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger at thecharlotteledger.com. And you can find out more about our 40 over 40 awards at ledger40over40.com.
QueenCityPodcastNetwork.com.